Okay, so you know how everyone's always fascinated by the end of the world? Like all those Nostradamus predictions, the movies, the whole bit.
Yeah, it's like a collective morbid curiosity.
Exactly. But what if some of those ancient predictions, particularly those found in the Bible, weren't just, stories? What if they were clues?
Clues to how it all ends.
Yeah, that's what today's deep dive is all about. We're going deep into the book of Revelation, looking at a video that breaks down these prophecies about the end times.
Sounds intense.
It is. But don't worry, we're not here to preach or anything.
Right,
We're approaching this from a purely analytical standpoint.
right.
Think of us as like curious explorers, not doomsday prophets.
I like it. So what's the first sign of the apocalypse this video talks about?
So the first one that really caught my eye was this idea of a rapid, explosion of knowledge as a precursor to the end.
An explosion of knowledge.
Yeah. And they link it back to the prophet Daniel.
Oh, Daniel. Yeah, he was big on those visions of the future.
Right. It's fascinating how it seems to line up with what we're seeing today.
Yeah, when you really think about the timeline of human progress, it's pretty wild how quickly things have accelerated.
Think about it. We went from living in caves to figuring out agriculture over thousands and thousands of years, and then boom, we're going from calculators to smartphones in a few decades.
It makes my head spin. It's almost like,
Like we're on fast forward or something. But is the speed itself the issue? Or is it more about how we use all this knowledge?
you hit the nail on the head. It's not just about progress. It's about the potential for things to go really wrong really quickly. And that's where Daniel's prophecies get even more interesting.
How so?
Well, he didn't just predict an explosion of knowledge. He also talked about all this unrest that would come with it. Wars, famines, natural disasters, stuff that echoes what we find in Jesus' teachings as well.
And let's be real, those themes are all over the headlines today. The war in Ukraine, that whole COVID pandemic, the crazy increase in natural disasters. It's hard not to see the parallels.
It's definitely unsettling, especially when you consider the next part of Daniel's prophecy.
Oh, you mean the whole King of the North and King of the South thing? Yeah, that one's a real head-scratcher. Two superpowers locked in this epic struggle for dominance. It's giving, Cold War vibes, but with potentially apocalyptic consequences.
Exactly. And for centuries, there have been tons of different interpretations of who these figures represent. But a lot of people today believe the King of the North refers to Russia,
And the King of the South.
the United States.
Wow. Two global heavyweights, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Makes sense when you look at today's geopolitical landscape.
Right. And the thing is, it's not just about competition, according to Daniel's prophecy. He actually foresees a future conflict involving Israel.
Oh, man. Tell me more about this conflict.
So basically, it all kicks off when the King of the North betrays a peace agreement. They attack, and it triggers this much wider conflict.
So even if there's apparent diplomacy happening, the potential for a major blow-up is always there. It's like
Yeah.
a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
And you know what else the video highlights?
Something Jesus said that I found really fascinating. The significance of the sea in the end times.
The sea. That's interesting.
All right. Because think about it. Back then, most people probably hadn't even seen a vast ocean.
It would have been so beyond their experience, such an unknown.
And yet, here's Jesus talking about these terrifying tsunamis, this roaring sea causing widespread panic. It's almost like he was describing something beyond what people could even fathom at the time.
And now, centuries later, we're seeing these incredibly powerful tsunamis. I mean, that 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan.
Devastating.
It really drives home how vulnerable we are to the forces of nature.
Absolutely. Speaking of things that make you feel a little vulnerable, let's talk about the societal shifts the video mentions. It talks about a rise in fanatics. Yeah, people so set in their beliefs that they're knocking on doors, trying to convert everyone they meet. You know the type. Be honest, you've encountered this at some point, right?
Well, it's a funny thing you should bring that up because and it is interesting you should mention those fanatics because I remember...
Hold that thought. We'll have to save your story for next time because we are just about out of time for today's deep dive.
Oh, okay.
But don't worry, this isn't over yet. We'll be back next time to finish unpacking these biblical prophecies and explore even more signs of the end times. And most importantly, we will get to hear our expert's story about encountering one of these fanatics firsthand.
I promise it's a good one.
Until then, keep those thinking caps on and stay curious. Welcome back to the deep dive. So last time, we were really getting into it, weren't we? All those wild signs of the end times from the book of Revelation.
Yeah, some pretty heavy stuff.
For those just tuning in, we're talking about this video we found, breaking down these ancient prophecies, like, for example, this idea of knowledge growing super fast.
Right, which is kind of ironic considering how much information is at our fingertips these days.
Totally. And then there's that whole power struggle, the king of the north versus the king of the south.
Which, according to the video, could represent Russia and the U.S.
Exactly. Oh, and we can't forget about those terrifying prophecies about the sea. Giant tsunamis wiping everything out. It's kind of eerie how those ancient predictions seem relevant today, especially with what happened in Japan back in 2011.
Yeah, definitely makes you think.
And on that note, we were just about to hear your story about encountering one of those, what'd the video call them?
The fanatics?
Yes, fanatics. You were about to tell us about a time you met someone like that.
Oh, right. Well, it wasn't a knock on the door, but I was actually at a coffee shop reading a book about ancient prophecies.
No way. Talk about a coincidence.
Right. It's kind of spooky now that I think about it. But anyway, I'm minding my own business, and this person at the next table leans over and says, completely serious, you know, those prophecies you're reading, they're all coming true very soon.
Whoa. What did you say to that?
Well, you know me, always up for a good conversation, especially about this stuff. So we ended up chatting for a while, talking about different interpretations, the different signs, all of it.
Wow, so it was like a real-life deep dive right there in the coffee shop.
Exactly. And, you know, what struck me most wasn't so much the message itself, but the absolute conviction this person had. They were totally convinced the end was right around the corner, and they had to share that belief.
You know, it makes you realize these prophecies tap into something very human, this need to understand the world, especially when it feels like things are chaotic and uncertain.
Absolutely. And that's really at the heart of these prophecies, isn't it? Are they warnings, wake-up calls, or just reflections on the way history seems to repeat itself? There's no easy answer.
That's the truth. No easy answers. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for today's deep dive. Looks like those end times will have to wait.
They've waited this long.
That's one way to look at it. But before we go, I think it's important to remember that prophecies, regardless of your beliefs, can offer a chance to reflect, to really look at the world, acknowledge both the good and the bad, and think about our own role in it all.
Well said.
So, as we try to make sense of this crazy, fast-paced world, maybe the real question isn't when it will all end, but how we choose to live in the meantime. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope this exploration of biblical prophecies has given you some food for thought. As always, we encourage you to check out the source material for yourselves. Links are in the show notes, and let us know what you think. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those big questions.